Hey guys, so today I'm here with the Teraflex 3-inch base suspension lift kit with shocks fitting all 2007 to 2018 four-door JK Wranglers. So this is going to be for the JKU owner that's looking to comfortably fit a 35-inch tire while still maintaining good drivability on the street. Suspension kits can be very tricky to choose from considering we offer a ton of different kits on the site and there's a lot going on with your suspension, so it's really going to come down to the price of the lift kit as well as what you're looking to get out of your Jeep. This option by Teraflex is going to be good for the JKU owner that still wants to conquer those trails, get good flex, while also still maintaining some comfortable driving while you're out on the street. So this is going to come with everything that you need to get the height on your Wrangler. It's going to come with all of the little brackets, the coils, the shocks. You do get a track bar relocation bracket for the rear, and I do like that out of this kit. However, because it is a base suspension kit, it's not going to come with everything that you need in order to correct that lift geometry. If you're wondering about the geometry that you may need to correct, I would recommend to go on our channel and check out our suspension geometry video. But what I do really like about this kit is since it is a base option, you can build off of it. So if you wanted to correct that geometry, you can pick whatever control arms, you can pick whatever adjustable track bars or whatever other components that you're looking to add to this kit, really giving you some options. So as far as tires goes, guys, like I said, this is going to comfortably fit a 35-inch tire. You're going to get good flex out of that, a lot of up travel, while still being able to fill out that wheel well very nicely, giving it a very aggressive stance. So as far as 33s, you're going to have a lot of room for up travel. They may look a little bit small with this kit, however, they still will definitely get the job done. And as for 37s, as you can probably already assume, you're not going to have much room at all. You're going to have some rubbing, and you're not going to have a lot of room for up travel, and they may even hit your fender. So as far as price goes, this is going to be just south of $900, and I personally think for what you're getting out of this kit, considering it is Teraflex and they make quality components, with also being a base kit that comes with really everything that you need to get that height, that's a really good price point. Usually those more expensive options are just going to come with more components included in the kit, control arms or the adjustable track bars that I mentioned earlier, or they may even get a little crazy and come with cross members, coilovers, and then those lesser expensive options are just not going to come with everything that you may need in order to set up a complete kit. So as far as this lift kit goes, I personally think that it fits very well in that $900 price point. You are getting everything that you need for that height, but you are able to add off of this kit, giving a little bit of touch of your own. So install is going to be a 3 out of 3 wrenches on the difficulty meter, as you can probably already assume, considering this is a lift kit. If you are doing this in your driveway, guys, it's probably going to take you about 5 hours to get the job done, and you will need a lot of basic hand tools to get the job done. So speaking of that install, let's jump into that now. The tools that I used for my install were a couple blocks of wood, PB blaster, 2 pry bars, an assortment of impact wrenches, an assortment of wrenches, vice grips, pair of snips, a marker, pair of pliers, a couple of pliers, a Phillips head screwdriver, a flathead screwdriver, 3/8 inch drive and 1/4 inch drive ratchet, Loctite, a cutoff wheel, a trim removal tool, the provided tool by Teraflex, a hammer, 2 dead blows, an assortment of extensions, an assortment of deep sockets, shallow sockets, and swivel sockets, and a 6mm Allen key. So the first thing we need to do is get our Jeep up in the air. Now, if you are on the ground and using a jack, you will need a jack as well as some jack stands. Chock the rear wheels, and we're going to start in the front, so you can go ahead and jack up the front, but we're going to go ahead and put ours on our lift. So now we need to get our tires off. You will be using a 19mm deep socket as well as a breaker bar or a ratchet. I'm using an impact wrench to do this. So the first thing that we need to do is support our axle. You can grab some pole jacks, or if you're on the ground, you will need some jack stands. Next step, we're going to take off our sway bar end links. So I'm going to use an 18mm socket and an 18mm wrench to remove this bottom bolt. Now you will need to save this hardware, so put this aside. Now we're going to remove this top nut. There is a stud here. You will be using a 19mm wrench or a 3/4 inch wrench to hold that stud still. And we're going to use an 18mm socket on the other side. Now we can repeat that process on the other side. Now because there's not a lot of room here, I am going to use an 18mm swivel and the 18mm wrench. Get this bottom bolt off. Then we can go back to our 19mm wrench and our 18mm socket for that top nut. So our next step is going to be to remove our shock. I'm going to start with our lower bolt using an 18mm socket and wrench. Now in order to get the bolt out, you might have to put a little bit of pressure on the axle. Now we can move to our top bolt. So now we can take off the nut that's on our shock stud up at the top here. You will need a 16mm ratcheting wrench and a 16mm wrench. And I would like to mention right out of the gate that these are usually a problem. I would recommend soaking them in PB Blaster before you go ahead and try to take that nut off. However, if you are still unable to take that off, you may need to cut off the top of the shock stud. We're not reusing these, so if you cut off the top of this shock stud, you'll be able to fit a socket on there. There's not a lot of room to work with here. Also worth mentioning, they sometimes break. However, we are provided with all new hardware and new everything in our kit. So to keep the shock body still, I'm going to put our 16mm wrench here. We're going to wedge this right up against our shock tower. Then we're going to take our 16mm ratcheting wrench, put that on top of our stud. Now this one surprisingly broke easy, however they're not all going to be like this. It also should have a cup washer and a bushing up there. Flat washer. You're also going to have a bushing. So once that's out, we can wiggle our shock out of our shock mount at the bottom and fully remove our shock. So while we're over here, what I'm going to do now is just remove the bolt holding in our brake line bracket. We do need this to be off while we drop our axle just to protect our brake lines. So I'm going to use a 10mm socket and impact to get that off. Now this is attached to our breather here. We'll need to remove that with a trim removal tool. Now we have to move to the bottom here. We do need to remove a 10mm bolt in order to take out our bracket that's holding our brake line and our ABS line onto our spring perch. So this is also a 10mm. We're just going to go ahead and remove that. It'll be one bolt, and the other side will be wedged in. So if we just pull this out, careful of your lines. I'm going to grab a flathead screwdriver just to wedge that out. And that'll give us enough slack so when we drop our axle, our brake lines are protected. Now we can repeat that process on the other side. So after we have our shocks out and our brake lines disassembled, what we can do next is drop our axle. Now we're going to go ahead and get our springs out, but we want to make sure the axle drops low enough to fit our new springs in, which are about 3 inches higher. So I would like to mention that we are not removing the track bar just yet. If we do see that we need to drop our axle a little bit lower to fit in our new springs, we will go ahead and do that, but we're gonna see how everything droops without that dropped. So we're just gonna go ahead and start to lower our axle down. You wanna lower the pole jacks or your jack stands evenly. We're not getting enough droop because our track bar is pulling our axle to our side. So what we're gonna do is remove our track bar bolt. This is gonna be the axle side with a 21mm socket. I'm also using an extension to clear our drag link here. All right, so once that's removed, we can continue to drop our axle. So we started dropping our axle and our drive shaft is hitting pretty hard on our exhaust. Now we are gonna put some exhaust spacers in to make sure that doesn't happen while we're driving. But what we are gonna do just to get our front set up is remove our drive shaft for the time being. Now you will need to mark the flange as well as the bolt to make sure that it's going in the same spot that we took it out of. So I am just going to mark that with a Sharpie here. So I'm using a 15mm swivel socket in order to get these off. So once that's disconnected, we can put our drive shaft bolts to the side and continue to lower our axle. That's given us enough room to take out our stock spring. So we can go ahead and wiggle that out. You can do that on the other side as well. So before we install our new spring, we do need to install our bump stop spacer. We are just going to remove our existing bump stop by just pulling that out. So what I did was just put a little bit of lubricant inside of here. I used some PB Blaster, and then we can just wedge that in our bump stop extension. So what we need to do now is press our bump stop extension as well as our bump stop into place. So what I'm gonna do, I grabbed 2 blocks of wood. I'm just going to put our bump stop extension where it needs to be. And then we're going to basically just lift our axle back up. And these 2 blocks of wood, we're gonna press that right back in. I also greased the bump stop extension as well as the inside of our bump stop. So before we go ahead and install our new springs, I did want to show you guys side by side your new spring in comparison to your stock one. So this is what's going to give you all of the height out of your lift kit. These are going to be about 3 inches taller than your factory spring. These are also going to be a lot beefier than your factory spring. However, they are going to have a very similar spring rate, giving you comfort out of your ride. So now that we have our axle drooped low enough, we can go ahead and install our new springs. Now that's not going to seat initially because when we drop our axle, the control arms make it roll back. So we're going to go ahead and get in the other side, and then we'll put pressure on the axle to straighten these guys out. So I would like to mention that you may want to do the driver's side first. Now I'm just going to raise the axle up, put a little bit of pressure on our springs. Passenger side is a lot easier. It is a little bit harder to maneuver around your drag link here. However, you always want to start with your driver's side. Also, you want to make sure that you have the spring rotated into the retainer down at the bottom, on the bottom of your spring perch. And this is going to look a little bit funky here. The bump stop is touching but once it's on the ground and the axle is re-centered, that will be okay. So before we install our new shocks, I did want to show you guys a side-by-side again, giving you guys a little bit of a comparison between your stock component and your new component, and tell you what you're getting performance-wise out of the new one. Right off the bat, there's two different types of shocks. You have a hydraulic shock, very similar to your factory. That's going to be very fluid-like. It's going to be very comfortable, perfect for the daily driver. However, it is susceptible to shock fade over time, which is cavitation or foaming forming inside of the shock when it's worked really hard, like bumps at fast speeds or excessive washboards. So it may leak, it may fade, and you may feel a little bit of bounce out of it. Then you have a nitrogen charged shock or a gas charged shock like the Teraflex 9550 VSS. This is going to be a little bit stiffer, however, it is going to resist any of that shock fade over time. So what's going on inside of the shock? So this has a twin tube design. It keeps the gas and the oil separated, which is perfect for that long lifespan and to resist shock fade over time, unlike a monotube shock like this one. This is also going to be a lot beefier. It's going to be a little bit larger in diameter, keeping that oil and the gas separated. Not to mention, this will also have a triple chrome plated induction hardened shaft. So this is going to be very durable while you're out on the trail. So if you are familiar with shocks, if you do get a chip in the shaft, it can induce shock fade over time, letting some air inside of your shock, inducing that shock fade, but this is going to resist any of that while you're out on the trail, being very durable. So what I also would like to mention is this is going to accommodate for your lift height. This is going to be a lot longer than your factory shock, so some other options for lift kits that you might see out there without shocks, I would always recommend getting shocks with that because it does accommodate the lift height. If you were to put this on your Jeep right now, with it lifted, this will be maxed out and you're not going to get the correct valving. So this is going to accommodate for all of that. It's going to be a lot beefier and it's going to be tuned for exactly what you want to do with it. So let's go ahead and install our new shocks. So now we're going to install our shock. You are going to need your cup washer first, then the bushing. We also need to line up our bushing as well as our cup washer. Might be easier to put that on first. We're going to put that shock up through. So once the top shock nut is on, we can take a 9/16 inch wrench and tighten that down. Now this is not going to be super tight. You do only want to torque this to about 20 foot-pounds. So when tightening this down, you want to make sure that this has a lot of pressure on it. However, you want to tighten it down until it starts bulging. You don't want to over tighten it so it is bulging. So we're almost at that point. So now that that is tight, we can loosely install our bottom shock bolt. And the reason why I say we need to loosely install it is because we need to install our anchor. So now you might have to play with the height of your axle in order to get your bolt lined up. Once it's there, we can go ahead and install that. Now we're just going to loosely install that there, and then we'll come back to that when we are attaching our brake line anchor. We're going to go ahead and remove this bracket that sat at the bottom of our spring perch, and we're going to attach an anchor that will attach to our bottom shock bolt. So what we need to do now is remove this bracket so we can attach our brake lines to an anchor that is going to be mounted up to our bottom shock bolt. So what I've done is took a pair of vice grips, clamped this down, make sure this isn't moving around, and I'm going to take a cutoff wheel and slice the bracket up along the brake line. However, you only have to cut through half of the metal, and then we're gonna take a pair of pliers and pull this back. Now the other way is to grab a pair of pliers and pull this back manually with a little bit of lube, but that is very difficult. So we are just going to very carefully cut it and make sure you do not cut your brake line. Once we have that bent back, we can take a trim removal tool and just remove our ABS line from our bracket. So once that bracket's out, we can take our anchor and attach it to our bottom shock bolt. So what I did was move the brake line to the outside of the shock because we didn't have enough slack for our anchor. All I did was just take out this bottom bolt and maneuver it around the bottom of our shock here. And now we can install our anchor. But first we're gonna take off these two clips. So I just grabbed a pair of snips and we're just going to cut these zip ties. Be very careful because this is your ABS line. After those are off, we can attach our anchor to our bottom shock bolt. So we are just going to thread that on, make sure that it stays on while we are attaching our lines inside of our anchor. So there's going to be two cutouts, one at the bottom for your ABS line. I'm going to wedge that in there, and then the second at the top, the brake line. Now we can take a zip tie, put that through the bottom of the hole, and zip tie that together. And with your pair of snips in hand, we can just trim that. Now we can do the same thing on the other side. After we've installed our new anchor, we are just going to reinstall our 10mm bolt back into the frame. And then we can go ahead and tighten this bottom shock bolt down with our 18mm socket and 18mm wrench. So what we're doing now is moving to our exhaust spacers. These are very difficult to get out just because the bolts are most likely to rust. What we did was heated up this bolt with an inductor tool and took a 13mm socket to go ahead and extract that bolt. This will be a little bit tricky. However, once you get the bolt crack free, you should be able to ratchet it out. I'm using a 15-inch extension just to pass our cross member here. So that's one side. Now we can move over to the other side. So what we're going to do now is install our sway bar end link, but first, before we install it, we want to install our Zerk fitting. This is going to go at the bottom of your front link, and you can tell your front link and your back link apart because of the length. The rear links are going to be a little bit longer, and your front link, because you do get a quick disconnect setup, is going to have a ball and socket style joint. So we are going to install that Zerk fitting at that bottom joint. Using an 8mm deep socket, we're just going to tighten that on there. Make sure not to over tighten it. Don't want to mess up those threads. That's just going to be there so you can maintenance it over time and keep them healthy. We can go ahead and install our top stud. So you're gonna have a washer and a nylon lock nut. We're gonna go ahead and thread that on there. And before we go ahead and tighten that down, we are going to install our bottom stud where this will link onto. So we're just going to place our stud on, then we can place our flat washer as well as our nylon lock nut. We're going to go ahead and tighten that down with a 3/4 inch or 19mm ratcheting wrench. And I'm also going to use a Phillips head screwdriver just to keep that stud from spinning all the way around. We want to make sure that this hole in the front here is accessible because that's where our pin is going to be, where you quickly disconnect your sway bar link. So you just want to make sure that this is on the inside of your drag link and tie rod. But how this is going to work is this ball and socket style joint is going to slide right on to that stud here. But before we slide it on all the way, we just want to make sure that it's at the right height, and then we can go ahead and tighten down that top stud. So I'm going to be using that same 3/4 inch ratcheting wrench, and I'm going to be using a 6mm Allen key to keep the stud from spinning. So we're not going to connect these right now. We still do need a little bit of play in our axle in order to attach our drive shaft as well as our exhaust spacers, and we need to attach the other side. So when your sway bars are disconnected, you do need somewhere to store them. So we're going to go ahead and install our mount that's going to stow our sway bar end links away when you're on the trail. So this is going to be your mount. You will have a stud just like the bottom of your sway bar end link that you'll be able to slip the bottom of your sway bar end link onto and clamp it with that same pin. Now this is going to be threaded and they are going to be side specific. So we're going to go ahead and thread that on. And as you can tell, I'm holding a little bit of Loctite here. You can just put a little bit of thread lock on there and then thread the nut on. You just want to make sure that this stays in place. So once that is threaded on, we can take our Phillips head screwdriver and a 14mm socket. We can go ahead and tighten that down. Once that's tightened down, we can put this aside and take off our bolt up top that we're going to be attaching this to. So we're going to go ahead and remove this nut with an 18mm socket. I'm also using an extension. So we can attach our mount and sandwich this in between. So how it's going to work is once you have your sway bar end links disconnected, this is going to go onto there like that. Keep it out of the way while you're out on the trail. And once you want to use your sway bar links again, we can take that back down to the original mount. What we need to do now is install our exhaust spacers. Now, after you have those 13mm bolts out, we're going to start on the driver's side with our shorter spacer. We're going to push our exhaust back and wedge our spacer in between. Now we're gonna start to thread our bolts in. I would recommend to hit it with a little bit of anti-seize. And you are provided new bolts, so you will not have to worry about the old bolts. So we can grab our longer spacer and go ahead and put that in. So this is going to help out with our drive shaft. This boot is sitting very closely to our exhaust. So putting these spacers on is going to move our exhaust downward and get it out of the way of our drive shaft. Now we can take a 13mm socket, go ahead and tighten those up evenly. So after that side's tight, we can move to the other side and tighten that down. What we can do now is reattach our drive shaft. Keep in mind of where your mark is. You want to make sure that that is correctly lined up. Then we're going to go ahead, throw a little bit of Loctite on each of the bolts, blue Loctite to be specific. Now we're going to take our 15mm swivel, start to tighten them down in a star pattern, just to make sure everything's even. I just want to make sure that they're threaded with the hand ratchet, and then we can go in with our impact and tighten them down. What we can do now, I just wanted to show you guys how this happens. Say you just got off the trail, you want to put your sway bar links back on. We're going to slide them onto your pin. We're just going to attach this washer, and then we are going to take our pin and slide that through. That's going to keep them secured on your axle. So after we've finished up in the front, what you can do is jack up the rear of your Jeep, chock the front wheels, or if you're on a lift, we can just head to the back. Now what we have to do is support our axle. Now we can take off our sway bar links. So just like the front, we're going to be using an 18mm socket as well as an 18mm wrench. However, I am using an extension here just because I want to be able to clear that shock body. Now we can do the same thing on the other side. And we will be reusing that hardware, the bottom hardware, so make sure that you do keep that. Now we can swing down our sway bar and remove the top nut. Same thing as the front, that 18mm socket and 19mm wrench. Now we can do the same thing on the other side. So what we're going to do now is disconnect our shocks. So we're going to start with our bottom shock bolt. You're going to be using the same as up front, 18mm wrench and 18mm socket. Make sure that axle's supported, then we can do the same thing on the other side, and then we'll be able to take out the top two shock bolts. While we're on our shocks, we're going to go ahead and remove the two top shock bolts. I'm going to be using a 16mm swivel as well as a pretty long extension. I think it's a 15-inch extension, and we're going to go ahead and remove these. So before we go ahead and lower our axle, we do want to take off our Ebrake bracket. It's going to be two 10mm nuts on a stud in our body. So we're just going to take those off. I'm using a 10mm deep socket. And we will not need this bracket anymore, so you can go ahead and fully remove that. Then we can move to the side of the frame rail and remove the brake line brackets on the side. Now we're going to take out the 10mm bolt holding in our side brake line bracket for our soft line here. Just going to remove that with a 10mm socket, get that out of the way, and we will be able to put on a brake line drop bracket in just a minute. We can do the same thing on the other side. One more thing before we lower our axle, we do want to take out our track bar bolt. This is going to be replaced with a rear track bar relocation bracket, and this is going to allow our axle to drop a lot lower. I'm using a 21mm socket as well as an impact wrench to take that out. Make sure to keep this hardware and that flag nut on the other side. Then we can go ahead and start to lower our axle down. All right, so now we can remove our springs. Now make sure you keep these isolators. We will be using these for our new springs. So before we can drop our axle any lower to fit in our larger springs, what we do need to do is release our ABS lines in the rear. There's a couple of pop clips on your axle as well as on your frame. We're just going to take our trim removal tool and go ahead and pop those off. Same thing for the other side. So now that you have a bunch of slack, we can drop our axle a little bit lower to fit in our new springs. Now with our factory isolator, we can go ahead and pop that into place. All right, now we can do the same thing on the other side. Now we're just going to raise this just a little bit to put some pressure on our springs, and then we can grab our hardware for our spring retainers. Now we can install our spring retainer, so it's going to be this large washer here. We're just going to place that right on top of our spring perch. Then we can place the provided bolt that comes with that through our spring perch. Then we can take our provided flange nut and our provided lock washer, stack that in our provided tool, put that in the back of the spring perch here in the opening. So once you have the lock washer and the nut inside of the bottom of the spring perch, start to thread this bolt in. So a little trick I learned is to actually take a very, very small piece of tape and just tape the lock washer to the bolt or the nut, and then you should be able to sneak that in. So now we can grab a 9/16 inch socket and a 1/4 inch drive ratchet and your little provided tool here. We are going to sneak that on the back of our flange nut. We're going to go ahead and tighten this down. Once that's tightened down, we can just do the same thing on the other side. Now that our lower spring retainer kit is in, we do need to install our top one. So this is going to be provided to you with a bolt as well as a nut. We're just gonna pass it through this hole that is the closest to our frame. So you're gonna have a retainer, a flat washer, as well as a bolt and a nut. So we are going to try to position this correctly around our spring. So we're just gonna attach this nut for the time being. Make sure this is correctly positioned. Now the 19mm wrench and a 19mm socket, as well as an extension, using a 15-inch extension here, just to clear everything. We're just gonna tighten that down. So this top retainer is going to ensure while you're out on the trail, if you flex too hard, your spring is not going to fall out. Now we can do the passenger side. It is gonna be a little bit harder because we do have the gas tank here. You can bend your inner fender liner back. So what we're gonna do next is install our bump stop spacer. This is just like the one in our front, except for we're not extending the top bump stop. We're just adding a little spacer down at the bottom on our axle. So we have our provided hardware that we're going to bolt through our axle here. You're gonna need 2 flat washers, your bolt, and a nut. So we're just going to attach both of them at first, and then we can tighten them down. You'll have one in the front and one in the back. Back's gonna be directly behind. You wanna make sure this shelf as well is facing the front of your Jeep. And now we're gonna take a 13mm wrench, hold that nut still, and then a 13mm socket to tighten this down. Same for the back. Now we can do the same thing on the other side. So now while we're back here, we're going to install our brake line drop bracket. This is actually going to be lined up perfectly after we have taken off this bracket. So now we just reinstalled the factory bolt with our new bracket. We're going to tighten that down with our 10mm socket. You do have to manipulate it. You can bend the hard line, be careful. So then we can take our provided hardware, which is gonna be 2 flat washers, your bolt and a nylon lock nut, put that through both of our brackets and secure the nut on the other side, and then tighten them down with an 11mm socket and an 11mm wrench. And then we can just tighten up that top bracket with our 10mm socket. Then we can do the same thing on the other side. What we're gonna do is install our rear shock. What I like to do is get one of the bolts threaded by itself. So once that's up there, we can get our shock ready. We're going to hook that into our bolt. We are going to thread that other bolt in. You always wanna make sure everything's threading, and then you can tighten it down. Now we can grab our extension, our 16mm swivel, or our air impact. I'm also pushing up on the shock, make sure it's sitting flat. Now we're going to take our factory hardware and bolt in the bottom of our shock. You may have to tinker with the height of the axle in order to get this lined up. Seems pretty lined up for us. So now we can tighten that down with our 18mm socket and our 18mm wrench. We can just repeat that process on the other side. All right, so now we can attach our track bar relocation bracket. So first things first, with our track bar relocation bracket, we don't have to do any drilling, which is fantastic, but we do have to take out our lower control arm bolt on our driver's side. So you're gonna need a 21mm socket as well as a 21mm wrench or an adjustable. We're gonna go ahead and remove that. Pretty easy. Now your control arm's gonna wanna go all wonky, but we are just going to grab our track bar relocation bracket, put that in place, and then re-bolt that up. That should just slide right into place, which is very nice. Once that's through, we're not gonna tighten that down yet, but we are just going to thread the nut on the back of our control arm bolt. So we're gonna put this crush sleeve in the middle of our bracket here. You may need to take a pry bar and pry that out a little bit. So can we fit our sleeve in now? We can! Now we can do our best to get this bolt through. So now we can take our flat washer and our provided nut that is supposed to go with this bolt. Honestly, I really like this track bar relocation bracket in comparison to some others that I've seen. It's obviously very easy to put on. You don't have to do any other drilling. It bolts up to the axle as well as this part of the axle here. It bolts up to either side. Now we can grab our U-bracket and attach our flat washers, and we can attach the nuts that are provided to us. Now these two nuts together will be actually in a bag separated from the one that goes with the bolt. They do look similar, but they are different. So now I'm going to take a 19mm deep socket and go ahead and tighten these up. Now that those are tightened up, we can keep this socket on here and grab a 19mm wrench, and we can tighten up our bracket bolt. After that's good and tight, we'll go ahead and tighten down our control arm bracket bolt using that 21mm socket and 21mm wrench. Now I would like to mention that this, as well as this, has to be torqued down to 125 foot-pounds. Now we're going to go ahead and install our rear link. The top is going to be exactly like the front. So we have our stud here, then we're going to put in our sway bar, then we have our flat washer and nylon lock nut that we're going to go ahead and thread on. Then we can take our 6mm Allen key and our 19mm or 3/4 inch ratchet wrench, tighten that down. So as you can tell, when I was tightening that down, it was kind of jiggling around. What I'm just gonna do, I'm not gonna tighten it down just yet, but just to keep it in place, I'm gonna install our factory bolt. Now we can tighten down this bottom bolt using our 18mm socket and 18mm wrench. Now we can repeat that process on the other side. So if you guys notice, we did not attach our track bars yet in the front or in the rear. What we're gonna do is put the tires on our Wrangler and then we're gonna put it on its own weight. We're gonna see if our track bars line up. However, if it doesn't line up in the back, we can always wiggle the back end and get that to line up. And if it doesn't line up in the front, which it most likely will not because our axle is sideways a little bit, what we can do is have somebody go into the driver's seat, turn the steering wheel back and forth, and it should line up that way. But first, let's go ahead and put on our tires. Now I'm going to take my 19mm socket and just go ahead and tighten it down. So now that our tires are on, we can go ahead and lower this on its own weight. So what we're gonna do now is line up our track bars. So I'm gonna have someone wiggle the Jeep. You're gonna have to wiggle it back and forth. All right, and that bolt is through, you're good. So once we have our bolt in for our rear track bar, we can take our factory flag nut, put that on the other side. Now, if you are having contact with your spring, you need to make sure that the pigtail portion is facing the rear of the Jeep. That way you'll have enough room to put the flag nut back on without any contact. I just want to get it away from the spring so we can go ahead and tighten it up. Now, the flag nut's not going to have anything to grab onto like it did in this mount down here. So we are gonna have to hold it with a 21mm wrench, but we wanna get it away from the spring so the actual flag is not hitting our spring. So now that that's in position, our flag's not gonna hit our spring, we can take our 21mm wrench, go ahead and put that on the flag nut. Then we can grab our impact and our 21mm socket. So after that's tight, you want to make sure that it is torqued to 125 foot-pounds, and after that, you will definitely need an alignment, so I would recommend to do that immediately after you install your kit. So now we're going to go ahead and attach our front track bar. Obviously, you can tell right now that it's not lining up at all. That's okay. I'm going to have somebody in the driver's seat, and how you can align this is just turning the wheel back and forth until everything lines up. So now we can attach our flag nut on the other side. So after you feel that starting to thread, you can take your 21mm socket. So that's gonna wrap it up for my review and install. Make sure you like and subscribe, guys. And for more videos like this, keep it right here at ExtremeTerrain.com.